The rain battered against my windshield with the force of angry fists. Every single drop detonated like a miniature explosion within the weak, yellow beams of my failing headlights. Billows of steam erupted from under the hood of my pre-owned Honda, merging with the thick curtain of water that effectively isolated me from the rest of the world. I found myself stranded on a desolate stretch of road, caught somewhere between utter desperation and the middle of nowhere. "Come on, please," I whispered, twisting the key in the ignition one more time. The engine let out a horrible, grinding noise before falling completely silent, dead, just like everything else in my life had been lately. I let my forehead rest against the steering wheel, feeling the exhaustion settle deep into my bones. I had put in 26 grueling hours of work over the last 2 days, juggling 2 jobs, with barely enough money to cover rent, and now this happened. The car, which I had scraped together every single penny to purchase, had betrayed me 15 miles from home in the midst of the year's worst storm. My phone displayed absolutely no signal, and the battery was hovering dangerously at 12%. Perfect. Just perfect. I scraped together whatever little courage I had remaining and stepped out into the deluge. The rain instantly plastered my nurse's scrubs against my skin, the thin fabric offering absolutely no protection against the elements. My hair, which I had styled with such care that morning in a desperate bid to look presentable for my evening shift at the upscale restaurant, now hung in wet, stringy clumps around my face. The hood release jammed twice before it finally gave way. I peered into the mechanical chaos underneath, knowing full well that I wouldn't recognize a problem even if it jumped out and introduced itself to me. Steam hissed from the gaps in the metal, and there was a distinct smell of something burning. "Please, just give me this one break," I begged the inanimate object, as if it might suddenly take pity on me. It did not. I slammed the hood down with more force than necessary, my tears mixing with the raindrops on my cheeks. I was going to miss my second shift. I was going to lose that job. I was going to fail to make rent yet again, and Emma would be the one to suffer for it. The thought of my 4-year-old daughter waiting for me at my neighbor's apartment, expecting me to pick her up after my shift, broke something deep inside me. I leaned back against the car and slid down until I was sitting on the wet asphalt. With my knees pulled up to my chest, I sobbed openly through the sheets of rain and the blur of my own tears. I didn't even notice the approaching headlights until they were nearly upon me. 2 piercing beams cut through the darkness, followed closely by the low, powerful growl of an engine that didn't sputter or choke like mine did. The vehicle, a sleek black SUV with heavily tinted windows, slowed down and came to a smooth stop about 20 feet from my pathetic breakdown. I hastily wiped at my eyes, suddenly becoming aware of just how vulnerable I was. A woman, alone on a deserted road at night. Every warning my mother had ever given me flashed through my mind in an instant. The SUV's door opened, and a large umbrella emerged first, followed by a man. Even through the heavy rain, I could tell immediately that this wasn't some random Good Samaritan in a family sedan. Everything about this vehicle screamed money and power. He approached me slowly. His shoes, made of leather that probably cost more than my monthly rent, splashed through the puddles. I couldn't make out his face just yet, only the silhouette of broad shoulders beneath what appeared to be an expensive, tailored suit. "Car trouble." His voice carried clearly through the downpour, deep and tinged with an accent I couldn't immediately place. Italian, perhaps. I scrambled to my feet, embarrassed to be found crying on the ground. "It just died. I don't know what happened." As he drew closer, the streetlight caught his features. Dark hair, slicked back from either the rain or product, I couldn't tell. A strong jaw shadowed with stubble. Eyes so dark they seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. He was older than me, maybe in his late 30s, with the kind of face that had seen things, hard things, but hadn't been entirely hardened by them. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, stepping closer and extending the umbrella to shield me from the rain. I noticed then that his gesture had left him exposed to the downpour, his clearly expensive suit now darkening with water. Behind him, I saw that another man had exited the SUV and was standing vigilantly beside it, seemingly unbothered by the rain soaking him. "I didn't exactly plan this," I said, a defensive edge creeping into my voice. The corner of his mouth twitched, though it wasn't quite a smile. "Of course not." His eyes scanned my face, then moved to my soaked scrubs. Nurse. I nodded, crossing my arms over my chest, suddenly aware of how the wet fabric clung to me. I was heading to my second job. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or curiosity. 2 jobs. Bills don't pay themselves. The words came out more bitterly than I had intended. He nodded slowly, as if he were processing this information. What's your name? I hesitated. Stranger danger had been drilled into me since childhood, but I was also alone with a dead car in a storm. Sophia. Sophia Mills. Sophia. He said my name carefully, as if he were tasting it. I'm Antonio Russo. The name meant nothing to me, but the way he said it, with the expectation that it should told me it probably meant something to most people. Let me help you, Sophia. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. I don't need yes, you do. His directness startled me. You're stranded in a storm at night in a dangerous area, and you're crying. I wiped at my face again, mortified. I'm fine. Antonio Russo's expression didn't change, but something in those dark eyes softened almost imperceptibly. You're safe with me, he said, his voice lower now. I promise you that. A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with my wet clothes. There was something in the way he said it, like a man accustomed to people believing his promises. Like a man whose promises were either blessings or threats, with no middle ground. Before I could respond, the man by the SUV called out something in Italian. Antonio responded in the same language, the words flowing with natural grace. My associate says there's no fixing your car tonight, he translated, turning back to me. You need a ride. I can call someone, I protested weakly, knowing it was a lie. I had no one to call. My parents were gone. My friends had slowly disappeared after Emma was born, and her father had vanished with my savings. I had been too busy surviving to maintain relationships. Antonio raised an eyebrow, clearly seeing right through me. In this storm? With that phone that you keep checking? I doubt it has any signal out here. I clutched my nearly dead phone tighter. I need to get to Mario's on 5th Street. I'm already late for my shift. The Italian place. He seemed amused by this. You work for Mario? You know it. Something like a smile crossed his face. You could say that. Behind him, the man by the SUV shifted his weight, scanning the surroundings with practiced vigilance. The movement drew my attention to a bulge beneath his jacket, the unmistakable outline of a gun. My heart stuttered. Who were these men? Antonio must have noticed my change in expression because he turned slightly, following my gaze. When he looked back, his face had hardened almost imperceptibly. Salvatore is my driver and security, he explained smoothly. In my position, certain precautions are necessary. Your position, I echoed, anxiety bubbling in my chest. Antonio studied me for a moment. I'm in business. Various enterprises import, export, real estate. Each term seemed carefully selected, revealing nothing. I should have run. I should have declined his help and taken my chances with the storm. But where would I go? I had a daughter waiting for me. I needed that job at Mario's. I needed to get through this night. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Russo, but Antonio, he corrected. And this isn't an offer that makes sense to refuse, Sophia. You're soaked. Your car is dead, and you need to get to work. He gestured toward the luxurious SUV. I'm heading in that direction anyway. His logic was irrefutable, and yet something in me hesitated. Some primitive instinct sensing a predator, not necessarily one that would harm me, but dangerous nonetheless. A gust of wind drove the rain sideways, cutting through my wet scrubs like tiny needles. I shivered violently. Your daughter, Antonio said suddenly, would want you to make the practical choice. I froze. What? How did you? He gestured to my wrist where a charm bracelet hung. A single charm, a tiny silver E, dangled from it. Initial jewelry. The way you touched it when you mentioned being late. A mother's gesture. The observation was both impressive and unsettling. This man noticed details. Thunder crashed overhead, making me jump. Antonio didn't flinch. Time to decide, Sophia. His tone remained gentle, but I sensed an undercurrent of steel. This was a man used to having his suggestions taken as commands. I looked at my dead car, then at the expensive SUV with its promise of warmth and rescue, then back at the inscrutable face of Antonio Russo. Which danger was greater, the known or the unknown? Okay, I finally said. Thank you. Something that might have been satisfaction flickered in his eyes. He guided me toward the vehicle, his hand hovering near, but not touching, the small of my back. As we approached, Salvatore opened the rear door with military precision. The interior was all black leather and soft lighting. It smelled of expensive cologne and something else, a subtle masculine scent I couldn't name. Your belongings? Antonio asked, pausing before I got in. Just my purse. It's in the car. He nodded to Salvatore, who moved with surprising speed to retrieve it. Within seconds, he returned with my worn faux leather bag, handling it as carefully as if it contained priceless treasures instead of drugstore makeup and a half-eaten granola bar. Inside the SUV, warmth enveloped me immediately. Antonio slid in beside me, leaving a respectable distance between us. Salvatore took the driver's seat, and soon we were gliding down the rain-slicked road. Mario's, Antonio confirmed, reaching into a compartment and producing a soft cashmere throw. He offered it to me with a gesture that suggested refusal wasn't an option. I took it gratefully, wrapping it around my shoulders. Yes, please. I'm already an hour late. You work as a nurse during the day and a waitress at night? He asked, observing me with those penetrating eyes. I nodded, suddenly self-conscious. Single mom. You do what you have to do. And the father? The directness of the question startled me. Not in the picture. His choice or yours? His, I admitted. He left when I was 7 months pregnant. Took our savings with him. Antonio's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Some men are unworthy of the title. The SUV slowed to a stop at a red light, and I watched raindrops race down the tinted window, wondering how I'd ended up discussing my failed relationship with a stranger in an expensive suit. Thank you for the ride, I said, eager to change the subject. I'd be stuck there all night otherwise. Sometimes, Antonio said, his eyes never leaving my face, what seems like misfortune is actually fate. The light turned green and we accelerated smoothly, the powerful engine purring beneath us. I noticed then that Salvatore wasn't taking the direct route to Mario's. This isn't the way to the restaurant, I said, tension creeping back into my voice. A slight detour, Antonio replied calmly. There's flooding on Main Street. This route is safer. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him, but doubt gnawed at me as we turned onto a street I didn't recognize. Mr. Russo, Antonio, I really need to get to work. I can't afford to lose this job. He turned to me fully. Then, with a face devoid of emotion, he spoke. Sophia, you will not lose your employment. I give you my word on that. Once more, that unwavering certainty was present, the supreme confidence that whatever he said became reality. How are you able to make such a promise? I inquired. A slight but authentic smile touched his mouth. Because Mario happens to be my cousin, and his establishment is located on land that belongs to me. The disclosure struck me with the force of a physical impact. Antonio Russo was far more than a mere wealthy entrepreneur. If he held the deed to that building in this district, and if Mario, infamous for his connections and fiery temper, was his blood relative, then I understood with crystal clarity exactly who was sitting beside me. The hushed gossip among the waitstaff suddenly clicked into place. The private dining area that remained perpetually reserved yet seldom used. The way the kitchen crew snapped to rigid attention upon the arrival of specific patrons. I was seated beside a man who pulled the strings of half the city from the darkness. You are. I cut myself off, uncertain if voicing his true nature might be perilous. I am a businessman, Sophia, he replied quietly. One with interests across numerous enterprises. That is all you require to know for the moment. For the moment. The suggestion that there was more to come, that this meeting was not merely a chance act of benevolence on a tempestuous night, sent a fresh tremor through me. As the SUV veered onto 5th Street, the inviting illumination of Mario's restaurant came into view ahead. A wave of relief washed over me. I will have someone attend to your vehicle, Antonio announced as we came to a halt. Where do you reside? I paused, finding the inquiry intrusive. For the car, he clarified, although I harbored a suspicion he already possessed that information. I recited my address, a dilapidated apartment complex on the town's east side. Salvatore will drive you home once your shift concludes, he declared, allowing for no dispute. That really isn't necessary. It is raining. It is dangerous. And you have a daughter waiting. His tone permitted no debate. I insist. As Salvatore held the door for me, Antonio reached inside his jacket and brought out a business card. It was simple cream-colored stock, featuring only his name and a telephone number embossed in black ink. If you find yourself in need of anything, Sophia, anything at all. I accepted the card, our fingers grazing for a split second. His skin was warm, in contrast to the rain. Thank you, I uttered, at a loss for other words. As I stepped out, shielded by the umbrella Salvatore held, Antonio called out to me. Sophia. I glanced back. Life has been unkind to you. Perhaps that is about to change. With that enigmatic declaration hanging in the damp air, the door shut, leaving me standing at the entrance to Mario's, gripping a stranger's card and questioning whether I had just been saved or ensnared. I was unaware then that Antonio Russo never acted without intent. And he had just determined that I, for reasons I could not begin to understand, had become one of his objectives. The instant I crossed the threshold into Mario's, the atmosphere felt altered. The typical chaotic vibrancy of the Friday dinner rush carried an undercurrent of strain. Eyes darted in my direction, then swiftly averted. Conversations dipped into hushed tones briefly before resuming with an artificial casualness. Marco, the head waiter who had never offered me anything other than annoyed directives, hurried over at once. Sophia. His voice was pitched higher than usual. We were worried about you. I blinked, confused. In my 3 months of employment here, nobody had ever expressed concern for my whereabouts. I was merely another expendable server, one of many struggling single mothers willing to work late for cash tips. My car broke down, I explained, still squeezing Antonio's card in my moist palm. I apologize for being late. Marco flicked a glance toward the windows where the black SUV had been seconds ago. No apology is needed. These things occur, yes. His smile appeared forced. Your section is covered. Why don't you dry off in the back and take tables 15 through 20 whenever you are ready? I stood immobilized, unable to compute this unheard-of show of accommodation. Typically, being an hour late resulted in immediate firing, or at the very least, a shift without tips as a penalty. Is everything all right, Marco? Of course. Everything is perfect, he insisted with too much enthusiasm. Go, take your time. I headed to the employee locker room, conscious of the whispers trailing behind me. Under the harsh fluorescent glare, I checked my reflection in the mirror and winced. My hair was a wreck. Mascara had smeared dark shadows under my eyes, and my scrubs, while no longer dripping, clung unpleasantly to my skin. I retrieved the spare uniform I kept for emergencies from my locker. As I began to change, Lucia, another waitress, wandered into the room. So, she said, leaning against the lockers with thinly veiled curiosity. You arrived in his car. My hands froze on the buttons of my white blouse. Whose car? Lucia arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Don't play innocent, honey. Antonio Russo's car. ** Antonio Russo. The manner in which she spoke his name, part reverence, part dread, validated the suspicions I'd formed earlier. My car broke down, I repeated with care. He happened to be driving by and offered me a lift. Lucia laughed, a sharp, disbelieving noise. Antonio Russo doesn't happen to do anything, and he certainly doesn't pick up stranded women on stormy nights like some sort of dark knight. I finished fastening my blouse with shaking fingers. Who is he, exactly? She looked at me as though I had asked for the name of the president. Seriously? You've been working here for months and don't know? She dropped her voice to a whisper. He owns half the city. The legitimate businesses, anyway. The other half. She made a vague hand motion. Let's just say when the Russo family offers protection, Smart people accept. My stomach knotted. The firearm beneath Salvatore's jacket suddenly made much more sense. He is Mario's cousin, I said, echoing what Antonio had told me. Second cousin, Lucia corrected. But in the family, blood ties mean everything, even distant ones. She leaned in closer, her voice lowering further. What did he want with you? Nothing, I insisted, feeling suddenly defensive. He just gave me a ride. Lucia's face made it clear she didn't buy it. Well, whatever it is, be careful. Men like him don't grant favors without expecting something in return. Her warning lingered with me as I finished preparing and walked out to the dining floor. The restaurant was bustling, the warm illumination and gentle Italian music crafting an ambience of casual elegance that contradicted the apparently darker connections hidden underneath. As I neared my assigned section, I observed that table 16, typically kept for walk-ins, was roped off with velvet. A small reserved sign sat in the middle. Marco intercepted me before I could inquire. The Russo table is always kept ready, he explained in a low voice. Even when he isn't expected. I nodded, absorbing this new data as I started serving my other tables. Throughout the evening, I felt eyes upon me. The staff watched with fresh interest, likely pondering what link I had to their powerful patron. I did my utmost to ignore it, concentrating instead on delivering flawless service and earning the tips I so desperately required. It was approaching midnight when my phone vibrated with a text from Mrs. Garcia, my elderly neighbor who looked after Emma while I worked. Emma had nightmare calling for Mama. Everything okay? But thought you should know. My heart constricted. This marked the third nightmare this week. The doctor claimed it was normal after everything she had endured. Yet, knowing my daughter was scared and I wasn't there to soothe her made me feel as though I was failing at the singular job that truly mattered. Everything all right? I almost dropped the phone at the unexpected sound. Turning around, I discovered Mario himself standing behind me, his customary stern scowl replaced by something bordering on concern. Yes, I explained, startled he was addressing me at all. In 3 months, our exchanges had been restricted to him barking sporadic orders or critiquing my technique for pouring wine. Is she unwell? His bushy brows knit together. Just a nightmare. My neighbor is watching her. Mario nodded in a thoughtful manner. Children should be with their mothers, particularly at night. He scrutinized me for a long moment. You have worked hard tonight. Yes, despite your car troubles. I nodded, bewildered by his sudden interest in my work ethic. Good. Good. You may finish your shift early. Family comes first. I stared at him in disbelief. But I still have 2 tables. Lucia will cover them. He made a waving gesture. Your tips will not be affected. Before I could offer thanks, he walked off, already shouting for Lucia. I stood rooted to the floor, attempting to comprehend this unprecedented series of events. The answer arrived as I was gathering my belongings from the locker room. Marco appeared in the doorway, his usual haughtiness replaced by something resembling respect. Your ride is waiting, he announced. My ride. Mr. Russo's driver, Marco clarified. He is outside. The memory of Antonio's insistence that Salvatore would drive me home resurfaced. I had assumed it was merely a polite offer, not a concrete arrangement. That is really not necessary, I protested. I can take the bus. Marco looked genuinely horrified. The bus at this hour? Out of the question. Mr. Russo was very clear regarding your transportation. Very clear. The phrase hung in the air, heavy with implication. I received the distinct impression that Marco had been given direct orders concerning my welfare. Besides, he added with a tight smile, it is still raining. Indeed, when I stepped outdoors, the storm had not abated, and just as promised, the black SUV was parked directly out front, its engine idling. Salvatore stood next to the rear door, umbrella prepared. Ms. Mills, he greeted me with a formal nod. You really don't have to do this, I said, even as he shielded me from the downpour with the umbrella. I can find my own way home. Salvatore's expression did not waver. Mr. Russo's instructions were explicit. I hesitated, scanning the vacant street. The final bus would have departed 20 minutes ago, and a taxi would cost at least half of tonight's earnings. With Emma waiting at home, the practical choice was obvious. Thank you, I conceded, sliding into the back seat. I expected to find Antonio there, but the vehicle was empty. I wasn't certain if I felt relief or disappointment, and that confusion unsettled me. As we pulled away from the restaurant, I noticed Salvatore observing me in the rearview mirror. Is there something wrong? I asked, suddenly self-conscious. No, His eyes reverted to the road. Mr. Russo asked me to ensure you arrived home safely. Does he do this for all of Mario's employees? Salvatore's expression remained professionally neutral. I wouldn't know, The lie was transparent, but I didn't press. Instead, I gazed out the window, watching raindrops trace paths down the glass as we drove through the abandoned streets. What about my car? I asked suddenly, remembering. It is still on Westridge Road. It has been taken care of, Salvatore replied. Mr. Russo arranged for it to be towed to Angelo's garage. Angelo's? But that is the most expensive shop in town. I can't afford. The repairs have been covered. I sat up straighter. What? No, that is too much. I cannot accept, Ms. Mills, Salvatore interrupted, his tone gentle yet firm. When Mr. Russo offers assistance, it is best to accept graciously. The implication was unmistakable, and it sent a chill through me despite the warmth of the car. This wasn't charity. It was what? A favor that would require repayment. An investment in something I didn't yet comprehend? Why me? I asked quietly. Why is he doing this? Salvatore's eyes met mine briefly in the mirror. It is not my place to speculate on Mr. Russo's motivations. We traveled in silence for the remainder of the journey. When we reached my apartment building, a dingy complex with peeling paint and security doors that hadn't functioned properly in years, I felt a hot flush of embarrassment wash over me. The glossy black SUV appeared obscenely incongruous set against the backdrop of such poverty. Thank you for the ride, I said, my hand reaching out for the door handle. Just a moment, please. Salvatore's voice arrested my movement. He stepped out of the vehicle, walked around, and opened my door, holding an umbrella aloft. The sheer formality of the gesture felt surreal in my neighborhood, a place where survival always took precedence over courtesy. He escorted me all the way to the building's entrance, where I keyed in the entry code that hadn't been changed in ages. Good night, Ms. Mills, he said, offering me a business card that was a duplicate of the one Antonio had provided earlier. If you require anything, day or night, please call this number. It reaches me directly. I took the card, placing it alongside the one Antonio had given me. Thank you, Salvatore. He nodded, then paused for a beat. May I offer a personal observation? Taken aback, I nodded. Mr. Russo is a man of honor. Whatever interest he has in you, it stems from a place of respect. With that enigmatic remark, he returned to the SUV. I watched until the red taillights vanished around the corner, then hurried up the stairwell to Mrs. Garcia's apartment. The elderly woman welcomed me with a weary smile. She just went back to sleep. Pobrecita, she whispered, guiding me to her sofa, where Emma was curled up under a crocheted blanket. My daughter's face, even in slumber, bore the tracks of tears. Her dark curls, so similar to her father's, were damp with perspiration, and she gripped her stuffed rabbit with white-knuckled intensity. At only 4 years old, she had already faced more uncertainty than any child ever should. Did she say what the nightmare was about? I asked, gently gathering her into my arms. Mrs. Garcia shook her head. Just kept asking for her papa. The same as last time. The familiar guilt twisted deep inside me. Emma barely remembered her father, yet his absence was a wound that refused to heal. How do you explain to a child that the person who should love her most in the world had chosen to abandon her? Thank you for watching her, I said, balancing Emma's sleeping form as I dug into my purse for Mrs. Garcia's payment. She waved it off immediately. No, not tonight. You keep it. I started to protest, but she silenced me with a gentle, grandmotherly pat on the cheek. I saw the car that brought you home, she said, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. Very fancy. A new boyfriend? Just a ride, I insisted, heat rising to my cheeks. My car broke down. Mrs. Garcia's knowing smile suggested she didn't believe a word of it. Well, he must be somebody important. Those cars, they don't come cheap. Good night, Mrs. Garcia, I said firmly, cutting the conversation short before it could venture into territory I wasn't ready to explore. Back inside our tiny one-bedroom apartment, I tucked Emma into the bed we shared, then took a moment to survey our home. The furniture was second-hand, the decor sparse, but everything was clean and functional. It wasn't much, but it was ours. A sanctuary assembled from the debris of broken promises. On the nightstand beside me, Antonio's business card caught the light. Such a simple object, yet it seemed to pulse with potential. For what? I wasn't sure. Help or harm? Salvation or complication? I changed into an oversized t-shirt and slid beneath the covers next to Emma, who immediately nestled against me, seeking warmth and security. As I held her close, I thought about Antonio Russo, his piercing gaze, his commanding presence, the power that seemed to radiate from him. "You're safe with me," he'd said. The words echoed in my mind as sleep finally claimed me, pulling me under into dreams where dark eyes watched from the shadows and promises hung like stars just out of reach. Morning arrived with watery sunlight filtering through our thin curtains. Emma woke first, her small hands patting my face with the unrestrained affection of childhood. "Mama, wake up. It's pancake day." I groaned playfully, pulling her into a tight hug. Saturday mornings were sacred, the one time each week I could guarantee I'd be fully present for her. We had a ritual, pancakes shaped like animals, cartoons on our second-hand TV, and no rushing to get out the door. "What kind of pancake do you want today, sweet pea?" I asked, kissing the top of her head. "Elephant," she declared, bouncing on the mattress. I laughed. "An elephant is pretty advanced. How about a teddy bear?" She considered this with adorable seriousness. "Okay, but with chocolate chips for eyes." "Deal." As I mixed the pancake batter, I realized I felt lighter than I had in months. Despite the drama of the previous night, or perhaps because of it, I'd slept deeply without the usual anxiety dreams about overdue bills and looming deadlines. My phone buzzed on the counter. An unknown number. "Your car has been repaired. New alternator, oil change, brake check. Ready for pickup at Angelo's whenever convenient." Ah. I nearly dropped the phone into the pancake batter. How had he obtained my number? I hadn't given it to him. Before I could respond, another text arrived. "Keys at front desk. Bill settled." I set the phone down, my hands trembling slightly. The repaired car was a massive relief. I needed it desperately, but the ease with which Antonio had inserted himself into my life was unsettling. He'd found my phone number. He'd arranged repairs without my consent. He'd settled what must have been a substantial bill. The implications were both comforting and terrifying. I was being looked after by someone with significant resources and influence. But why, and at what cost? Emma's impatient call for pancakes pulled me back to the present. I forced a smile and returned to our Saturday routine, determined not to let these new complications spoil our precious time together. Hours later, after Emma was engrossed in a coloring book, I finally replied to the text. "Thank you for your help, but I can't accept such an expensive gift from someone I've just met. Please let me know how much I owe you for the repairs. I can set up a payment plan." The response came almost immediately. "It's not a gift. It's a necessity. You need reliable transportation for work and your daughter. No payment necessary or accepted." I stared at the message, torn between gratitude and unease. The practical part of me, the single mother who counted every penny, recognized the value of what he was offering. The suspicious part, the woman who'd learned the hard way that nothing comes without strings, wondered what the catch might be. As if sensing my thoughts, another message appeared. "Have dinner with me tonight, 8 p.m. I'll send Salvatore." Not a request, but a statement of what would happen. I bristled at the presumption, even as a flutter of something dangerously like anticipation stirred in my chest. "I can't. I have my daughter again." His response was immediate. "Bring her." I'd like to meet her. The suggestion caught me off guard. Men I dated in the past had viewed Emma as an inconvenience, a complication to be worked around. None had ever expressly asked to meet her. I stared at my phone, Antonio's invitation glowing on the screen. Bringing Emma to dinner with a man I barely knew, a man who was, by all accounts, dangerous, seemed reckless. And yet, something about the straightforward way he'd included her gave me pause. I don't think that's a good idea. We hardly know each other. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared. Several seconds passed before his response arrived. Fair enough. Another time perhaps. The car offer stands regardless. No strings. The absence of pressure surprised me. I'd expected insistence, perhaps even manipulation. The respectful retreat made me reconsider my immediate refusal. Thank you for understanding, and for the car. I set the phone down, relief mingling with an unexpected twinge of disappointment. Part of me, a part one wasn't ready to examine too closely, had been curious about what dinner with Antonio Russo might entail. Mama, look. Emma's voice drew my attention. She held up her coloring book, proudly displaying a purple elephant with orange polka dots. It's beautiful, like your dress. I smiled, momentarily confused. Which dress, sweetie? The pretty one. The one in the box. I followed her pointing finger to our front door, where a large white box tied with a black satin ribbon sat innocuously. A box that definitely hadn't been there earlier. Heart racing, I approached it cautiously. There was no shipping label, no indication of how it had arrived. I lifted it, surprisingly heavy, and brought it to our small dining table. Can I open it, please, please? Emma bounced excitedly beside me. Let me check what it is first, I said, carefully untying the ribbon. Inside, nestled in layers of tissue paper, lay a dress of deep burgundy silk. As I lifted it, the fabric cascaded like liquid, catching the light in rich, warm tones. It was elegantly cut with a modest neckline and 3/4 sleeves, beautiful without being overtly sexy. Beneath it was a smaller box containing a pair of black leather heels that looked Italian and expensive. A card rested at the bottom, heavy cream card stock with a handwritten note in bold, confident strokes, for when you're ready. No expiration date. Ah. I sank into a chair, the dress pooled in my lap. The gesture was presumptuous, intrusive even. He'd somehow learned my address, my phone number, and apparently my dress size. The level of information gathering was unsettling. And yet, the dress was perfect. Not flashy or revealing, but the kind of elegant simplicity I'd admire in store windows, knowing I could never afford it. The kind of dress that said its wearer deserved to be seen, to occupy space, to be taken seriously. It's so pretty. Emma reached out to touch the silk reverently. Are you going to wear it to the princess ball? I laughed despite myself. What princess ball? The one where you meet the prince, silly. She twirled around the room, lost in her 4-year-old fantasy. If only she knew the man who'd sent this dress was more likely to be a villain in those fairy tales than a prince. And yet, I carefully returned the dress to its box, my mind racing. The lack of pressure in Antonio's messages, combined with this gift that came with no expiration date, suggested patience. He was making his interest clear while giving me space to decide how to respond. It was manipulative in its own way, but it showed a level of respect I hadn't expected. My phone buzzed again. Your car will be delivered to your address by 5 p.m. today. Keys with the attendant. I typed quickly. How did you know where I live? The response came immediately. I know many things, Sophia. It's both my business and my protection. The honesty was refreshing, if unsettling. No pretense, no apology. The dress is beautiful, but I can't accept it. 3 dots appeared. Then keep it. Wear it when you choose. If you choose. Or don't. It's yours regardless. I set the phone down, uncertain how to respond to generosity that left me no graceful way to refuse. The dress represented something I hadn't had in a long time, a choice that wasn't constrained by necessity. A luxury I couldn't justify but desperately wanted. Mama, can we go to the park? Emma asked, already pulling on her jacket. You promised. I welcomed the distraction. Yes, Let's go. The community park was only a few blocks away, a small green space surrounded by aging apartment buildings. It wasn't much, just a set of swings, a slide with peeling paint, and a sandbox, but to Emma, it was a kingdom of possibilities. As she raced toward the swings, I scanned the area out of habit, noting the other parents, the teenagers lounging on benches, and the general surroundings. Regarding the safety of our immediate surroundings, nothing appeared to be amiss until my eyes settled upon a black sedan stationed on the opposite side of the street, its windows completely obscured by dark tint. It might have been a mere coincidence. In a city this size, there were likely dozens of identical vehicles, yet the sensation of unease tracing my vertebrae suggested a different conclusion. I continued to supervise Emma as she played, propelling her higher on the swing set when she requested it and catching her as she slid down to the bottom, but a fragment of my focus remained locked on that automobile. It did not move. No distinct figure entered or exited the vehicle. It simply sat there, a shadowy fixture on the periphery of my consciousness. After an hour had passed, Emma's stamina finally began to fade. "I'm hungry, Mama. Let's go home for lunch," she said. I agreed immediately, grasping her small hand in mine. As we began the walk back toward our apartment building, I couldn't fight the urge to glance over my shoulder. The sedan had vanished. However, in the spot where it had been parked, a different vehicle now sat, a dark SUV that appeared disturbingly familiar. My walking pace accelerated, forcing Emma to struggle to match my lengthening strides. "You're walking too fast," she grumbled. "Sorry, sweet pea." I willed myself to decelerate, attempting to project an air of calm despite the anxiety crawling beneath my skin. Once we were safely back inside the apartment, I secured the deadbolt and peered cautiously through the slats of the blinds. The street below looked entirely ordinary. There were no suspicious automobiles, no men in tailored suits monitoring our building. I told myself I was being paranoid. Antonio had assisted me during a genuine crisis, paid for my car repairs, and sent a dress. While his behavior was certainly unusual, it wasn't necessarily sinister. And yet, the rumors regarding who he was and what he was refused to leave my thoughts. The afternoon drifted by without incident. Emma took a nap and subsequently occupied herself with cartoons while I managed to catch up on laundry and pay a few bills. At exactly 5 p.m., a knock sounded at the door. Looking through the peephole, I identified a young man dressed in coveralls, dangling a set of car keys. "Delivery from Angelo's garage," he announced through the wood. I opened the door with caution, keeping the security chain engaged. "Yes, your Honda is in the lot, all fixed up." He passed the keys through the narrow gap. "Mr. Russo said to inform you that we replaced the alternator, changed the oil, and performed a full inspection. It should run as good as new." "Thank you," I replied, accepting the keys. Did he mention the cost?" The young man appeared slightly awkward. "It is all taken care of, Mr. Russo's instructions." I nodded, having anticipated that answer. "Thank you." After he departed, I stood by the window, gazing down at the parking lot where my aging Honda now rested, appearing cleaner than it had in years. The glass gleamed in the late afternoon sunlight, and even from this distance, I could discern that the dent in the passenger door, a souvenir from a hit-and-run in a grocery store lot, had been professionally repaired. My phone vibrated with an incoming text. It wasn't Antonio this time, but Lucia from the restaurant. "Heard you got the Russo treatment. Lucky girl. You working tonight?" I had completely forgotten it was Saturday, my regularly scheduled shift. "Yes, coming in at 6 o'clock. Her reply came instantly. "Marco says you're off the schedule. Paid leave. Boss's orders." I stared at the screen in utter disbelief. Paid leave? I had never even been granted unpaid leave. There must be a mistake. I need the hours. No mistake. Marco said Mr. R was very specific. You are covered for a week. Full wages plus your average tips. My hands began to tremble as I placed the phone on the table. This was crossing a definitive line. Repairing my vehicle was one thing, but interfering with my employment was an entirely different level of intrusion. I dialed the number printed on Antonio's card before I could talk myself out of the confrontation. He picked up on the second ring. Sophia. Hearing my name spoken in his accented voice sent an unforeseen shiver down my spine. You cannot do this, I stated, skipping any pleasantries. Do what, exactly? His tone was tranquil, bordering on amused. Interfere with my job. I need those hours. I need to work. You need rest, he countered. You work 2 jobs. You are exhausted. Your daughter needs you to be present, not depleted. The precision of his assessment only stoked the fires of my indignation. That is not your decision to make. You don't know anything about my life or what I need. There was a pause. Perhaps not everything, but I know enough. His voice softened perceptibly. The leave is paid, Sophia. You will not lose a single penny. Consider it a gift of time. I don't want gifts. I don't need charity. Not charity, he corrected instantly. Respect. For a mother working twice as hard as she should have to because a man failed in his responsibilities. The direct reference to Emma's father caught me completely off guard. How do you know about that? People talk, especially when I ask questions. The implication sent a chill through me. He had been making inquiries into my life, digging into my past. Why? I demanded. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? Another pause followed, longer than the last. When he spoke again, his voice possessed a different quality, softer, more intimate. Have dinner with me. Not tonight. Tomorrow, just the 2 of us. And I will explain everything. I should have refused immediately. Every instinct for self-preservation screamed for caution. And yet, just dinner. I verified. Just dinner, he confirmed. I will have Salvatore pick you up at 7. Mrs. Garcia has already agreed to watch Emma. That pushed me back over the edge of frustration. You spoke to my neighbor before even asking me. I made contingencies, he admitted without a hint of apology. If you had refused, no harm done. That is invasive, presumptuous. Yes, he agreed simply. It is also efficient. His candor was disarming. There was no pretense, no attempt to soften the reality of his methods. I don't understand you, I said finally. Tomorrow, he promised. 7 o'clock. After a moment of hesitation, I acquiesced. Tomorrow. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Who are you talking to, Mama? Just a friend, I said, terminating the call. About grown-up stuff. She accepted this explanation with a child's easy faith, climbing into my lap for a cuddle. As I held her close, breathing in the sweet scent of her hair, I wondered exactly what I was getting myself into and whether I was placing the most precious thing in my life at risk. The following day passed in a blur of nervous anticipation. I cleaned our apartment, played with Emma, and attempted not to dwell on the evening ahead. At 6 o'clock, I finally opened the box containing the burgundy dress. The silk felt cool against my skin as I slipped it on. It fit flawlessly, skimming my curves without clinging, the rich color warming my pale complexion. I hadn't worn anything this beautiful since, maybe ever. Mrs. Garcia arrived promptly at 6:30, her eyes widening as she took in the sight of me. Dios mio, you look like a movie star. Emma spun in delighted circles around me. Mama's going to the princess ball. I knelt down to her level, suddenly overwhelmed with doubt. I don't have to go, sweet pea. I can stay home with you. No. She shook her head emphatically. You have to go meet the prince. If only life were as simple as her fairy tales. I hugged her tightly, inhaling her scent, drawing strength from her innocent belief in happy endings. I'll be home soon, I promised. Be good for Mrs. Garcia. At precisely 7 o'clock, my phone buzzed with a text from Salvatore. Outside whenever you are ready. With a final glance in the mirror and a deep breath to steady my frayed nerves, I stepped out into the unknown. The restaurant wasn't Mario's, as I had half expected, but a venue I had never visited, an exclusive establishment located on the top floor of the city's tallest building. The Maître D greeted Salvatore by name and led us directly to a private elevator. Mr. Russo is waiting, he said with deference. The elevator ascended in silence, the floor numbers lighting up in rapid sequence. My stomach fluttered with the passing of each floor, nerves, anticipation, or perhaps a mixture of both. "First time?" Salvatore asked, his usual stoicism briefly giving way to something resembling kindness. I nodded, smoothing invisible wrinkles from the silk dress. "You look lovely," he offered, surprising me. "Mr. Russo will be pleased." Before I could formulate a response, the elevator doors slid open directly into a private dining room. The space was intimate yet luxurious, characterized by dark wood, cream-colored walls, and soft lighting emitting from crystal chandeliers. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights glittering below. And there, silhouetted against the sparkling skyline, stood Antonio. He turned as we entered, his expression transforming from polite expectation to something far more intense. His gaze traveled from my face to the dress and back again, a slow, appreciative assessment that made my skin feel warm. "Sophia," he said, crossing the room with measured steps. "Thank you for coming." Up close, I noticed details I had missed during our rain-soaked first encounter, the precision of his tailoring, the subtle silver at his temples that softened his otherwise dark hair, and the scent of his cologne cedar, and something warmer, like amber. "The dress was made for you," he observed, his eyes locking onto mine. "You mean I was measured for it?" I corrected, unable to keep the sharp edge from my voice. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. A reasonable assumption, but incorrect. "I have an eye for proportion." The way he said it caused heat to rise in my cheeks. I glanced away, taking in the rest of the room, the single table set for two, the bottle of wine already breathing, and the notable absence of any other diners or staff. "Are we alone?" I asked, suddenly aware of Salvatore's departure. "The staff will bring each course and then leave us to our privacy," Antonio explained, guiding me toward the table with a light touch at the small of my back. I thought it would be more comfortable for our conversation. He held my chair, waiting until I was settled before taking his own seat across from me. The table was small enough that we could speak quietly and still be heard, yet large enough to maintain a proper distance. "Wine," he offered, already reaching for the bottle. "Just a little," I said. "I'm driving." His expression flickered. "Actually, I assumed Salvatore would drive you home. I have my own car now, remember?" I raised an eyebrow. "Thanks to someone's interference." He poured the wine, a deep red vintage that caught the light like liquid garnet. "Not interference," he countered. "Investment." "In what, exactly?" I challenged, meeting his gaze directly. Antonio studied me for a moment, seeming to appreciate my directness and potential. Before I could press the matter further, the first course arrived, delicate plates of something that looked more like art than food. The server described each element in reverent tones, then disappeared as quietly as he had arrived. I waited until we were alone again. "You promised explanations." Antonio took a measured sip of wine, then set his glass down with deliberate precision. "I did. But first, tell me about Emma." The request caught me off guard. "My daughter." "Why?" "Because she is important to you, and I want to know what is important to you." Something in his tone, a genuine curiosity, perhaps, made me consider his request. "She's 4. Smart. Stubborn. Loving. She sees the good in everyone. Like her mother," he observed. I laughed, the sound coming out sharper than I intended. "I'm not sure about that. Life has made me cautious. With good reason, it seems." Antonio's expression darkened. "Her father. He took more than money when he left." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "He took her security, her trust." I stared down into my wine glass. She still has nightmares about him leaving, even though she barely remembers him. Antonio's jaw tightened, a muscle working beneath the skin. Some debts deserve to be repaid. There was a threat embedded in those words that should have frightened me. Instead, I felt an unexpected surge of vindication. "His name is David Mercer," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "He disappeared 6 months before Emma was born. Emptied our joint account, $12,000 we had saved for the baby and the medical bills." I took a steadying breath. The last news I had placed him in Seattle with a new family. Antonio gave a single nod, his face unreadable. He didn't take notes or ask follow-up questions, yet I had the clear feeling that David Mercer's time of abandoning responsibilities without repercussions was coming to an end. The second course was served, offering a brief break from the intensity of our discussion. Once we were alone again, Antonio shifted the subject in a different direction. "You work 2 jobs," he stated. "Nursing by day, waiting tables at night. Both physically draining, both underpaid." I stiffened a bit. "It's honest work." "I wasn't criticizing," he replied, his voice softening. "I was expressing admiration and worry. Concern. You are exhausted, Sophia, driving yourself into the ground to support your daughter." He leaned in slightly. "What happens if you fall ill? If you get hurt? What becomes of Emma then?" That question struck a nerve, highlighting one of my deepest fears. "I manage. You survive," he corrected. "There is a difference." I put down my fork, my appetite fading. "What is your point, Antonio?" He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes evaluating, then spoke with his characteristic directness. "I want to help you." "Why?" I challenged him. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he countered. "I know you are intelligent, determined, and fiercely protective of your daughter. I know you've been dealt a terrible hand and are playing it as best you can. And I know you deserve better." His absolute certainty was disquieting. "And what do you gain from this arrangement?" Antonio smiled. A genuine smile this time, one that touched his eyes and transformed his face from merely handsome to something almost breathtaking. Direct. I liked that. He took another sip of his wine. "What I get is the satisfaction of knowing I have made a difference, of using my resources for something worthwhile." I wasn't convinced. "That is all." His expression shifted, something darker entering his gaze. "For now, yes. I won't lie to you, Sophia. I find you compelling. But my help doesn't come with expectations or demands. Everyone wants something," I said, the bitterness of experience coloring my words. "True," he acknowledged. "But sometimes what they want isn't what you fear." The main course arrived. Perfectly cooked steaks, roasted vegetables, and sides I couldn't name. Again, the server appeared and disappeared with professional discretion. "So, what exactly are you offering?" I asked when we were alone, cutting into the most expensive piece of meat I had ever been served. "Financial security," Antonio replied simply. "An apartment in a safer neighborhood, a college fund for Emma, healthcare beyond what your insurance covers." He held up a hand as I started to protest. "Not charity. Consider it a scholarship of sorts. In exchange for your time, occasionally dinners like this, conversations." I narrowed my eyes. "Just conversations?" His expression remained impassive. "I'm not proposing an arrangement of the kind you're implying, Sophia. Whatever develops between us, if anything, would be separate from my financial support." The distinction was important, but still unsettling. "Why me? There must be dozens of struggling single mothers in this city." Antonio set down his knife and fork, giving me his full attention. "Because from the moment I saw you, soaked to the skin, crying beside that broken car, but still with a core of steel that wouldn't bend or break, I knew you were extraordinary." The intensity in his eyes made it difficult to breathe. "You don't know that. You don't know me." "I know enough," he repeated. "I know your supervisor at the hospital describes you as the most dedicated nurse on the floor. I know Mario says you never complain, never miss a shift. I know Mrs. Garcia says Emma is the most well-adjusted child in the building despite everything." The extent of his investigation should have alarmed me. Instead, I felt a strange combination of flattery and resignation. Of course, he'd done his homework. Men-like. Antonio Russo didn't operate on impulse or emotion. "I need to think about this," I said finally. He nodded, unsurprised. "Of course. Take all the time you need." The rest of dinner passed with lighter conversation. Antonio asked about my nursing career, sharing that his mother had been a nurse before her marriage. He spoke of his childhood in Sicily, his migration to America as a teenager, his early struggles to assimilate. He revealed pieces of himself strategically, I suspected, building a foundation of commonality between us. By dessert, a decadent tiramisu that melted on my tongue, I found myself relaxing despite my reservations. Antonio was intelligent, surprisingly funny, and a good listener. In another context, another life, I might have considered him the perfect dinner companion. "It's getting late," I said eventually, glancing at my watch. "I should get back to Emma." Antonio nodded immediately, signaling for the check. Of course, family comes first. The phrase, simple but stated with sincerity, struck me. In my experience, men viewed my daughter as competition for my attention, an inconvenient reminder of another man's presence in my life. Antonio seemed to genuinely respect my maternal priorities. As we rode the elevator down, standing side by side in comfortable silence, I found myself studying his reflection in the polished doors, the strong profile, the confidence in his posture, the subtle signs of power in his bearing. Dangerous, yes, but perhaps not to me. In the lobby, Salvatore waited discreetly by the entrance. At Antonio's nod, he stepped outside to bring the car around. "I had a lovely evening," I said, the politeness feeling strangely inadequate after the intensity of our dinner conversation. "As did I." Antonio took my hand, his thumb brushing lightly across my knuckles. "Think about what I said, Sophia. No pressure, no deadline." I nodded, suddenly unable to form a coherent response with his hand holding mine. "May I call you tomorrow?" he asked, releasing my hand. "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how quickly I agreed. Something like satisfaction flickered in his eyes. "Good night." The drive home was quiet, Salvatore maintaining his professional distance. As we pulled up to my apartment building, I noticed a new security guard stationed at the entrance, one I'd never seen before. "Mr. Russo's arrangement," Salvatore explained, following my gaze. "For the building?" "He hired security for the whole building," Salvatore nodded. "Starting tonight, 24-hour coverage." I stared at him in disbelief. "Why would he do that?" "Because you and Emma live here," Salvatore replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. I sat in stunned silence for a moment, trying to process the implication. Antonio had already begun intervening in my life, not just with gifts or car repairs, but with substantial changes to my living situation. "I haven't agreed to anything yet," I said. Salvatore's expression remained neutral. "The security remains regardless of your decision." As I exited the car, he handed me a small box from Mr. Russo for Emma. Inside was a stuffed rabbit identical to the one my daughter already treasured but was falling apart from years of love. A replacement, ready when needed. The thoughtfulness of the gesture, small but meaningful, affected me more deeply than the expensive dress or dinner. Upstairs, I found Mrs. Garcia and Emma both asleep on the couch, a children's movie playing softly in the background. As I gently lifted my daughter, she stirred but didn't wake. "Sweet dreams, little one," I whispered, carrying her to our bed. As I changed out of the beautiful dress, Antonio's offer replayed in my mind. Financial security, a safer home, a future for Emma, all in exchange for what exactly? Companionship, conversation? There had to be more to it. Men like Antonio Russo didn't invest in strangers without expecting returns. And yet, as I slipped beneath the covers beside my sleeping daughter, I couldn't deny the temptation. Not just for the material security, but for the protection Antonio represented in a world that had shown me its harshest face. The promise of safety, even from a dangerous man, held a powerful allure. "You're safe with me," he'd said that first night. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to consider that I might not have to face everything alone. Morning light filtered through the curtains as Emma's small hand patted my cheek. "Mama, wake up. Tell me about the prince." I groaned playfully, pulling her close. "What prince?" "From the princess ball," she insisted, her eyes wide with excitement. "Did he have a castle and horses?" I laughed, smoothing her tangled curls. "No princess ball, sweet pea. Just dinner with a friend." "Was he handsome?" she pressed, undeterred. The image of Antonio's intense gaze flashed through my mind. "I suppose some people might think so." Emma nodded sagely. "Like in my stories, the prince is always handsome. If only life were as simple as her fairy tales, where handsome meant good and power was always used nobly. Antonio Russo might look the part of a prince, but I knew enough about his world to recognize he was something far more complicated. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Antonio. Good morning. I hope you slept well. Such a normal message, as if from any potential suitor. It was easy to forget in these small moments what I knew about who he was. I set the phone aside without responding, focusing instead on our Saturday morning ritual. Pancakes, cartoons, and no rush to be anywhere. These simple moments with Emma were precious, untainted by the complications of adult life, by the choices I now faced. Later, as Emma napped, I finally allowed myself to consider Antonio's offer. Financial security, a safer home, a future for Emma. The practical benefits were undeniable, especially with my car breaking down and medical bills from Emma's last bout of strep throat still unpaid. But accepting meant connecting my life and my daughter's to a man whose business dealings operated in shadows. A man who, despite his personal charm and apparent interest in me, was feared by everyone who knew his name. I needed more information before I could decide. My phone buzzed again. Not Antonio this time, but Lucia from the restaurant. Girl, what did you do? The boss is walking around like someone died. And Marco keeps staring at your empty tables like they're haunted. I frowned, typing quickly. What are you talking about? Word is Russo himself ordered your paid leave. But there's something else going on. Mario's all weird and jumpy. A chill ran down my spine. Weird how? Like he's scared. Really scared. Something about his cousin and family business getting mixed up. He was on the phone all morning speaking Italian super fast. I set the phone down, unease coiling in my stomach. Antonio had said his offer came without strings, but clearly my absence from Mario's had created ripples. Ripples that had frightened my boss. What was I missing? Before I could consider further, my phone rang. Antonio's number. Hello, I answered, trying to keep my voice neutral. Sophia. His voice was warm, intimate. I was wondering if you'd like to join me for a drive this afternoon. With Emma, of course. The inclusion of my daughter again caught me off guard. Most men avoided single mothers' children like a contagious disease. A drive where? I asked cautiously. There's a property I'd like to show you. A potential new home for you and Emma. My grip tightened on the phone. I haven't agreed to anything yet. I know, he said, his tone patient. This is just for your consideration. No pressure, no decisions today, just information. I hesitated, torn between curiosity and caution. We could stop for ice cream afterward, he added. I'm told there's an excellent parlor near the park. The normality of the suggestion ice cream, a park, was disarming, like something a regular man might offer on a Saturday outing with a woman and her child. All right, I agreed finally. What time? Would 3 o'clock work? Employment following Emma's afternoon nap? His awareness of my daughter's routine was simultaneously considerate and disquieting. 3 o'clock is acceptable. Perfect. Silvertoe will collect you. And Sophia, yes. Thank you for your trust. I do not treat it lightly. Once the call ended, I remained motionless, questioning whether I was committing a catastrophic error. Involving Emma in whatever existed between Antonio and myself felt like I was traversing a dangerous boundary. Yet, if I was genuinely contemplating his proposition, she would inevitably be impacted regardless. Promptly at 3, Silvertoe arrived, though in a different vehicle than his usual transport. It was a polished black SUV with dark-tinted windows, yet it seemed less menacing than the car I had first encountered. Child-appropriate, I realized. Emma's eyes were wide with thrill as we walked toward it. Is that a car for a princess? Silvertoe's typically impassive demeanor softened as he held the door open, displaying a booster seat that had already been installed. For the young signorina, he said with a formal bow of his head that caused Emma to giggle. I am not a signorina, she corrected him, climbing inside. I am Emma. Of course. My apologies, Emma. The formality he used to address my 4-year-old was both entertaining and poignant. We drove for approximately 20 minutes, leaving the congested streets of our neighborhood behind in favor of progressively wealthier districts. Emma chattered with excitement regarding the large homes and beautiful trees, while my nervousness about our destination only increased. Eventually, we turned into a gated enclave, pausing at a security booth where Salvatore exchanged a brief greeting with the guard. The gate swung open, and we continued down a tree-lined avenue flanked by elegant townhomes. Wow! Emma pressed her face against the glass. Mama, look at the flowers. The landscaping was undeniably gorgeous. Mature trees, manicured lawns, and meticulously tended flower beds. Every property appeared immaculate, radiating privilege and safety. We parked in the driveway of a cream-hued townhouse featuring black shutters and a red door. Antonio was waiting on the front stoop, dressed more informally than I had previously witnessed, wearing dark slacks and a light blue button-down shirt. The sleeves were rolled up to expose strong forearms. When Emma spotted him, she whispered loudly to me, "Is that the prince, Mama?" I suppressed a smile. "No, sweet pea. That is Mr. Russo, a friend of mine." As we exited the vehicle, Antonio walked toward us, his focus shifting immediately to Emma. Rather than the awkward hesitation most adults demonstrate around children, he crouched down to her eye level, extending his hand. "You must be Emma. I am Antonio. It is a pleasure to meet you." Emma, typically shy with strangers, placed her small hand in his with unexpected confidence. "Do you live in a castle?" He laughed, a genuine sound that altered his entire countenance. "No, merely a regular house, but I thought you and your mother might enjoy seeing this one. It contains a special room designed specifically for little girls." Emma's eyes grew wide. "For me? If you would like it," he said, glancing up at me with a question in his gaze. I nodded slightly, granting permission for the tour while withholding judgment on the implications. The townhouse was stunning. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, featuring an open floor plan and expansive windows that flooded the space with natural light. The kitchen was a culinary dream. The living room was cozy yet sophisticated, and the master bedroom suite was larger than our entire current apartment. However, it was the smaller bedroom Antonio showed us last that stole my breath. Painted a gentle yellow with built-in shelving and a window seat overlooking a small garden, it was precisely the type of room I had always desired to give my daughter. "This would be Emma's room," Antonio said softly, observing my reaction. Emma had already raced inside, spinning in circles of delight. "It is so big, Mama. Look. At the window. I could see stars at night." I swallowed against the sudden constriction in my throat. "It is lovely." Antonio moved closer, his voice pitched solely for my hearing. "The school district is exceptional. There is a playground 2 blocks away, and the security within this community is top tier. All the things a mother worried about. All the things I was unable to provide in our current circumstances." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. The question was barely audible. His expression turned serious. "Because you merit it. Because Emma merits it. And because I possess the means to make it a reality." "But why us? Why me?" Antonio remained quiet for a moment, watching Emma explore the built-in window seat. "Sometimes," he finally said, "we recognize value that others have overlooked. I recognized yours the moment I saw you. Soaking wet, exhausted, yet still fighting, still standing." The sincerity in his voice was hard to dispute. "I do not know if I can accept this," I admitted. "It feels like too much." "View it as an investment," he suggested. "In Emma's future, and in yours. And what do you receive from this investment?" His dark eyes met mine. There was something intense and unguarded in his gaze. The satisfaction of knowing I have made a difference, and perhaps, in time, something further. "But that is not conditional on this." He gestured to the house surrounding us. "This is yours regardless of how you feel about me." The distinction was significant but still disquieting. "I require time to think." "Of course." He nodded, stepping back to afford me space. "Ice cream." I believe I promised Emma. The ice cream parlor was charming and vintage, with checkered floors and red leather booths. Emma was immediately enchanted, her excitement escalating when Antonio informed her she could select any flavor she desired. As she deliberated with the seriousness only a 4-year-old can bring to the selection of ice cream, I observed Antonio. He was patient with her indecision, genuinely interested in her opinions, and displayed none of the condescension adults often show children. When a drop of chocolate ice cream landed on his obviously expensive shirt, he laughed it off without a trace of irritation. And when Emma shyly offered him a taste of her sprinkle-covered creation, he accepted with the gravity the exchange warranted. It was unexpected. All of it. The beautiful house that could be ours. The ease with which he interacted with my daughter. The absence of pressure or expectation. As we consumed our ice cream, Emma regaled Antonio with tales of her preschool adventures and her favorite stuffed rabbit. He listened attentively, asking questions that demonstrated genuine interest. "Mr. Antonio," she said finally, chocolate smeared across her cheek. "Are you going to be my mama's prince?" I nearly choked on my ice cream. "Emma." Antonio's eyes crinkled at the corners as he smiled. "That would be entirely up to your mother," he told her seriously. "But I would consider it a great honor if she deemed me worthy." His gaze met mine over Emma's head, and the sincerity there made my heart stutter. This was not merely charm or manipulation. Something more genuine existed beneath the surface of Antonio Russo than I had initially believed possible. By the time Salvatore drove us home, Emma had fallen asleep in her booster seat, exhausted from the day's excitement. As we pulled up to my apartment building, I noticed the new security guard nodding respectfully as we passed. "I will take Emma," Antonio said softly, unbuckling her with surprising gentleness and lifting her into his arms. She snuggled against his chest without waking, instinctively trusting in a way that both warmed and worried me. Inside my apartment, he carried her to the bedroom, laying her down carefully on the bed. I covered her with a blanket, brushing a curl from her forehead before turning back to Antonio. In the small living room, he appeared too large, too powerful for the space. His presence filled the room, making our modest furnishings seem shabbier by comparison. "Thank you for today," I said, suddenly feeling awkward. "The house is beautiful. It could be yours," he reminded me. "Whenever you are ready." I took a deep breath, meeting his gaze directly. "I need to know exactly what you want from me. Not the polite version, the truth." Antonio studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable, then spoke with characteristic directness. "Eventually, everything. Your time, your trust, your heart." He stepped closer, not touching me, but near enough that I could sense the heat of his body. "But I am a patient man, Sophia, and I understand the value of what I am asking for." The honesty was both terrifying and refreshing. "I cannot make any promises," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He nodded, accepting this. "I am not asking for promises, merely a chance to prove myself worthy of your trust." As he turned to depart, he paused at the door. "The house is yours whenever you want it. No strings, no expectations. The choice is entirely yours." After he left, I stood motionless in the center of the living room, his offer echoing in my mind. A new home, financial security, a future for Emma, and perhaps in time, something I had given up hoping for. A partner who saw my strength rather than my vulnerability. A man who valued my daughter as much as he valued me. It was a risk. Antonio Russo was dangerous, powerful in ways I could not fully comprehend. His world operated by different rules than mine. But as I looked around our tiny apartment at the water stain on the ceiling and the lock on the door that did not quite catch, I thought of Emma's delighted face as she twirled in that sunlit yellow bedroom. "You are safe with me," he had promised that first night. And against all logic, against every lesson life had taught me about trusting men who made grand promises, I believed him. The following morning, I texted a single word. "Yes." His reply came immediately. "I will send Salvatore at noon."